Okay. Well, presently, I have actively left an abusive relationship. It was a family dynamic that makes it harder to leave. Secondly, it's hard because the people involved seem to be in denial of, what's happening. And, like, I've fought this for a lot of years. I had, you know, like, nobody can tell you what to do. Like, people saw the signs that, I wasn't having any value in myself and, going and having a personality that I enjoyed. And, like, part of the problem being that, like, you just go and the situation has to be like broken apart. And it's the same thing whenever it goes for like boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. Sometimes you just have to take a break. Well, it's been a couple years now. Um, I think sadly that the situation has still just been like put to the side on the back burner. And, like that's partially, it gave me the opportunity to really think about how that I wanted it to, like have the ability to have my own freedom. And, people, they sometimes never leave these family situations because it's family. But the other thing to know is that sometimes family situations, they don't always, like it's not always that, like that there's really something wrong. It's, maybe like a half step to a new reality in some people's eyes. And in the other people's eyes, there is, a true place where that, it's, like it doesn't just fix itself. I think is the most important thing is that there's a lot of, reality that people don't see. One person sees it as, helping somebody, but the person that is, directly being affected by both people. Like it becomes a reality that is no longer uh like like there's more power being used and taken by one or two people versus the person that quote unquote they're working on, like. So in any case, I have recently broke out of some of the, like I used to really hold my words because I didn't want to trigger anybody. And when it comes down to it, you really have to, allow yourself to be, you know, um, uh, heard. If you've went through a reality where that you've been, overridden and, not rightly seen or heard, then you realize that, there's a whole nother monster underneath the original monster. And it's hard because some people think that they, have a duty to do or say something. And then you have, online opportunities where that, literal bots and messages, like just, bots being ran based on discussions and groups of words or things that have been typed out, text messages, and the overall, like basically pooling all these things together and creating a new, like not real person, to basically push the envelope. you know there's you know I love you too. I mean, like that's just the reality of it. That some people, whether that they know it or not, like they try to feel the vibe on the situation, but like the vibe has been, changed. Like it just literally becomes a like who has more spiritual power, like a push pull. And I just absolutely don't want to play the game. Like I've sat on the sidelines, and I've learned more than humans really should possibly ever know. And like that's just the reality of it, is some people are way overeducated and they don't want to play. Like some people are, worn out. And in all honesty, I do want to play. But the fact of the matter is that, like level out the playing field. It's just the thing about it is that some people are trying to push a reality on others that is not acceptable. And I feel as if that, like people just want to be at their core, like the core of human relationship is that they want to be heard. So if we have more people who can, you know, help this become, like something functional. I think that more than anything, people really are just trying to make it work. I just, people find the reality within the words of others, and then they're going, like, well, why didn't I think of that? Why don't we just, and so that's why I'm here today. This is what brings me here today. And I've got one, two, three videos going. And so I am, like this is where the change begins. We have to set our old realities to the side and, surrender. And, sadly, I have been absolutely abused, damaged to the limit. And, like I've been away from family for almost 3 years now, 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years. And, it's, it takes a strong human, first off. It takes a strong human, and it also takes a lot of learning, because there was a lot of things that I didn't understand prior to several, a couple years ago, even a year ago. And so I just continued to monitor human behavior and how it made me feel internally. And, I'm, someone who deals with a great degree of chronic pain that is starting to get better, so much that it's debilitating. Um, like it's pretty rough, and I try not to make that anybody else's issue. Like people aren't, like it's up to me to resolve my own issue and like heal my pain. And that doesn't mean that others can't also continue to, want to help, with somebody's pain. But the other thing to know is that it starts with surrendering, like surrendering in a way that, like you let go of, you basically say time out and surrender, and people show their cards, like first off, you have to know that the rule is that you can't expect to, you know, um, be in that vulnerable place. And also, like you have to know you're safe to not be attacked. So in allowing other people to like that's the trade is people, partners, family, friends. If you want to reset and you want to be able to, like if you, at some point you're sorry, and like you want to rebuild. And so that's whenever you say, I'm not going to, like, it's basically, an all or nothing thing. You say, I want to be honest with you and trade for, here is why that I require this, and here is why that this happened. And I'm sorry that this is what I did, but that's what I did. So it's about a personal surrender, and it's about trusting the people that you want to create this trust with. And also knowing that you have to be ready to stand up and walk away. Like if you have to be prepared to say, if there is no middle gray ground between all of us, between what we need, like what are our bottom lines, what are my requirements, you know and if those things aren't satisfied, you have to have a plan B. The second choice is, well, we will not have this discussion for 3 months. Like, and that's just it. Like creating these boundaries is necessary in finding peace. And so I just wanted to pop on here and here and here and just say, like this is how we find some solutions. And so I thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.